We're excited to have you here for the 5th of our regional meetings for the district-wide boundary analysis. Again, my name is Derek Turner. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for Montgomery County Public Schools, and I'm here with my colleague, Betsy Mcguire, who is the Executive Director of Operations for MCPS. Together, our offices co-lead this project. I want to just quickly thank Principal Jimmy DeAndrea and his staff for allowing us to be here tonight and use this space. So thank you all. Again, this is the 5th of our first phase of regional meetings. It's the second to last meeting, so we're excited. We made a lot of progress here. We've had several really productive meetings and one not so productive meeting. I'm really confident that tonight can be one of those productive meetings, and I really appreciate all that everyone's done to make sure that we are productive and are learning together. As a reminder, tonight's presentation is about the district-wide boundary analysis. We're not going to discuss the recent Seneca Valley, Clarksburg, Northwest boundary changes as part of this presentation and Q&A. But we will, Essie and I will stay after to talk to folks who have specific questions about that as well. So let me just walk you through the agenda for tonight. We're going to start with some FAQs from our consultants at WXY. We're going to do a project overview, some introductions. You're going to learn about the history of MCPS and some of the data that shapes this analysis. We're going to have a wrap-up and some polling questions and talk about next steps. And of course, at the end, we're going to have a question and answer period where we'll take your questions, and we're looking forward to that. And then we'll wrap up by 9:20-ish and get you guys home for a fun school day tomorrow. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Betsy Mcguire.
Thank you. So again, I'm Betsy Mcguire. I'm the Executive Director for Operations at MCPS. And again, we just really appreciate everyone coming here to have this experience with us tonight and discuss these issues. And as you can see from the outline, tonight's format will be part presentation and then some time to discuss with colleagues at your table and some new folks that you might be meeting there. I want to take just a minute to give a little history of the project and how we got to where we are this evening.
Sure,
it was right about a year ago, last January, that the Board of Education
you don't have to apologize. Don't worry about it.
Asking us
But what my role is to capture the kind of things that you're talking about so I can submit it to the consultants to be part of the
entire
study.
district. And that's a very broad look at how all of our schools are utilized in terms of capacity, what the student body makeup is at our schools, as well as how close are our schools in our neighborhoods and how are the geographic patterns arranged in such a way that feed those schools. So it's a very big project, and that's one reason why we really reached out to work with some external consultants. Before we did that, we had a number of meetings to talk with folks last spring around what kind of issues and ideas should we talk about in this project. What are the things that are important to people, and what should we take into consideration as we work on this really large endeavor together? And so we really appreciated those meetings, and we took that information and we put that into the request for proposals that we sent out to invite vendors to work with us. Excuse me. We had 2 respondents to that process, and we had an in-depth review process to select our vendor, and we are working with WXY Architecture and Urban Design as our consultants, and we're really excited to be working with them, and we're excited for the information and perspective that they can bring to help us with this process. And really what we're starting with is a deep dive into the data, and I think that's what you'll see tonight, is a lot of the information and data analysis that they've been able to help us bring to this. Hopefully it'll be informative. I think people generally learn something they didn't know, and with that, I will turn it over to them to go ahead and get started. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Essie and Derek. So let me just say a few quick words here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sean Dave from WXY. My name is Steve Brigham. I'm with a local firm, Public Engagement Associates. We're part of the WXY team for this project. And so what we're going to be focused on kind of broadly today is helping everyone understand how the school system has changed over the decades and what are the factors going into the future growth of the school system. Looking at the boundary analysis through 3 major lenses, utilization, school utilization, student body diversity, proximity to schools, and how those impact one another both within and across clusters. How the evening is going to work. So Kushan and I will be going back and forth. Kushan will be giving a number of focused, concise presentations, and each one of those will be followed by fairly brief table discussions so we can cover all of the material that we need to for tonight. At every table we have, well, I shouldn't say it every table. At most of the tables we have volunteer table facilitators who are experienced in small group dialogue. I'd just like to ask them to raise their hands and thank them ahead of time for the work they volunteered to do tonight. You'll see at your table, everyone's got a map of the county and the various schools and clusters. You also have, every person has a worksheet and a booklet that has the vast majority of the slides that we're going through tonight, so you'll be able to see it on the screen and also in the books. You have worksheets for jotting your own ideas down. The facilitators have their own worksheets. And one of the key jobs for tonight for them is to make sure that they capture all of your ideas, all the challenges and issues you identify, so that we have a written record of all of those from every single table and here for after the meeting. You also have polling devices at your table, and so we'll at 2 junctures during the evening we'll be using polling. We'll ask you questions and we'll get instantaneous results. There are going to be, I think, a few tables that where we are not covered for table facilitation, and with those tables we'll have some staff going around to share kind of the best way to help us and to help you facilitate your own conversation and make sure we capture your ideas. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kushan from WXY, and he will share a wide range of the answers to a wide range of questions we've been getting since December when we started the public meeting process. Kushan?
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kushan Dave. I'm a director at WXY and also a project manager for this study. And I'm really surprised because it's a Tuesday night and it's really glad to have this kind of awesome turnout. And I'm really hoping that we can get into some meaningful discussion. So again, thank you for your time tonight. What I'd like to do for next couple of minutes is to go through a couple of questions that were raised over the course of over the course of last month and a half, and really sort of try and address those and see if we can put the study in perspective and sort of clarify some of the objectives and our approach. Some of the questions that we'll be sort of going through would include: what is the purpose of the study? Why is it being done now? How is this process related to recent Clarksburg-Seneca Valley boundary change? How will the weighting of the 3 lenses, namely utilization, diversity, proximity, factor into the analysis? What is MCPS's and board's approach to weighting these lenses? How will the study factor in issues of traffic and travel time? How will the study be analyzing diversity? Why is the current scope different from the original proposal? What will the final report address? What is WXY team's experience with school capacity and boundary analysis? Will this analysis make boundary recommendation or changes? So let's start with the simple one. The purpose of this study is to provide a comprehensive assessment of school boundaries in light of county growth. Through forums such as this one, we want to receive community feedback on challenges that MCPS faces around diversity, around utilization, proximity, and really try and understand the related challenges of all these lenses, namely utilization, diversity, and proximity to school. Through this study, we also want to reinforce MCPS's core values of learning, respect, excellence, and equity. The purpose of this study is not to redraw school or cluster boundaries. And I'm going to apologize in advance, this is going to come up multiple times. Why is it being done now? Student enrollment has increased by 30,000 in past 20 years. Facility construction has not kept pace with this growth. And so what that has led to is sort of overcapacity in many schools. And this overcapacity has prompted POE to initiate an assessment, kind of a county-wide assessment. Through this study, we also want to ensure that MCPS can continue to provide high-quality facilities that support the educational programming needed to reinforce MCPS's core values. How is this process related to recent Clarksburg-Seneca Valley boundary change? This process is not connected to any boundary studies or recently adopted boundary actions. The consultant team has had no relation to this work. This analysis will not make any specific recommendations about boundary changes. Will this analysis make boundary recommendation or changes? I guess you know the answer to this by this one, but the answer is no, this analysis will not make any boundary options, recommendations, or changes. In each public meeting, WXY will go into more detail on the timeline, scope, and outputs of this analysis. How will the weighting of the three lenses, utilization, diversity, and proximity, factor into this analysis? What is the MCPS's and board's approach to weighting these lenses? WXY will examine and analyze all three of these lenses equally. And we'll get into a little bit of discussion about what these lenses are, what do we mean in our presentation session following this. And we will not prioritize one over the other. Policy FAA requires each of the four factors, again, geography, student body demographic, facility utilization, and stability of assignment over time, to be included in every review of school and cluster boundaries. This analysis will not reflect individual preferences or weighting. Instead, the analysis will be an objective assessment of data and community inputs that will be used as a resource by the board.
Excuse me. There was a sentence on the last slide that wasn't addressed in your comments.
Sorry, which one?
The last sentence. What is the MCPS board's approach to weighting these lenses?
So they look, policy FA really outlines the approach, board's approach as well, and they look at it in equal, all of these factors equally.
No, they don't.
How will this study factor in issues of traffic and travel time? Traffic is a multi-factor variable that includes elements like time of departure, means of transportation, road work, and more. All of these variables are not consistently quantifiable across a county of approximately 500 square miles. Therefore, the study focuses on factors that are more fixed and universally applicable, such as average bus time, travel time, when analyzing the county through the proximity lens. While traffic won't be a specific lens, in the district-wide boundary analysis, travel time is always factored in when actual boundary studies are implemented. How will this study be analyzing diversity? Excuse me. This study will look at socioeconomic as well as demographic and ethnic diversity within the county. Given the limits of this time, in this public meeting, presentation will focus on ever farms as an indicator of socioeconomic diversity. And again, we'll get into more details about this. But the overall study will look at a variety of analysis within diversity. WXY will also examine proportions of ESOL, English for speakers of other language, and will analyze racial diversity through a dissimilarity analysis that focuses on cluster and localized geographies. We look forward to hearing from you about what diversity means in Montgomery County Public Schools. Why is the current scope different from the original proposal? Well, discussions during the selection process and initial procurement focused on a process with more community engagement. And the scope of work focused on data analysis and community feedback, and not on the development of boundary recommendations or options. The revised scope substantially increased the number of area-wide meetings and prepared for large meeting turnouts, such as this one. And in addition, it also added 20 meetings with hard-to-reach groups and other stakeholder conversations as well. Other opportunities for feedback that were also added include online inputs, which is in phase 1, and sort of interactive tool in phase 2. And for those of you who are not aware of the boundary analysis website, I urge you to go to simply Google MCPS boundary analysis. As part of this, the presentation, the worksheets that we are talking about, all of this will be available.
Can I ask, how are you going to outreach to?
Sure, and if you wouldn't mind, we do have a Q&A slot, and it's at the end of the presentation. I'm sorry if it wasn't made clear earlier on, but I'm happy to sort of go back to that slide. And I think what we really want to do is use the 9 to 9:20 slot as sort of a Q&A where we want to interact with you more. But I think the purpose right now is to sort of go through sort of our items and sort of get into table discussions and talk a little bit more about the issues.
I think the concern is there's items you're glossing over or skipping when you're going through the slides.
We are going to go ahead and proceed through the presentation. The purpose of the FAQs was to try to provide a little bit of that information up front. But I think that as the data is displayed, there'll be more information coming, and we will handle questions at the end of the evening after everyone's been able to have the same presentation together. So that's what we're going to do. Thank you.
So if the purpose is to get our feedback, so
we'll be gathering feedback. We'll be gathering feedback during the discussion periods at the table, and we'll be collecting notes. We're not going to continue to interrupt. We are going to proceed, and we'll be taking questions at the end.
Let's keep. Another question is about the slide.
No, I'm sorry. We're not going.
So
we're not.
Come back
We're going. We will take questions at the end, and we're going to go ahead and proceed through the data now. Thank you.
So again, what's the purpose of
We are not going to continue to interrupt. So we would like to continue, we would like to have this meeting so that the people who have come here to hear the information are able to hear the information. If we aren't able to continue the meeting, then we'll have to take a pause.
I think the idea is that once we get into the details of each of these sections, I think we can then get into table discussions. And I think that's going to be sort of more feedback time for us. And then, of course, we're always happy to get.
Only 20 minutes.
That's not enough. 20
Yeah.
minutes is not enough.
Okay, so this one, what will the final report address? WXY's job is to accurately and objectively represent existing conditions. You want to take a deep dive into the data, sort of get the community feedback and learn from concerns, learn from your narratives, and really craft a report that will serve as a critical data resource for the board. And again, the purpose of this study is not to redraw school or cluster boundaries. What is WXY team's experience with school capacity and boundary analysis? Well, WXY Studio has done a range of boundary analysis work up and down East Coast. Some of our recent work includes work with School District of Lancaster, where we worked on boundary study and also looked at boundary options. We worked with City of New Rochelle, where we did capacity and enrollment projections. We worked with Boston Public Schools, where we looked at enrollment projection study and analysis of new school assignment policies. We worked with New York City Department of Education, where we worked on District P15 diversity plan and currently are working with 4 additional districts. In addition to that, WXY team has significant experience with large-scale engagement, workshops, and meetings. We have offices both in New York City and Washington, D.C., and our team includes Maryland-based Public Engagement Associates and Transport.
Successful for this area.
Is there any relationship between diversity and success? How well, that's the question I think everyone has.
Sure.
How well are schools doing and students doing?
Please let them continue.
I think I appreciate that question. I do want to get to that, but I think if you wouldn't mind waiting on to the end of the presentation, I want to be here. I do want to answer those questions. If that's okay. Thank you. So project overview. I think the next couple of slides, what we do want to do in these next couple of slides, again go over a little bit of what our approach is, what the objective and purpose of the study is. Really look at a couple of phases on how we are trying to sort of do this project. Again, the purpose is to provide comprehensive assessment of school boundaries in light of county growth. We want to receive feedback on challenges of creating sort of more diverse schools, looking at utilization and overutilization, looking at proximity. We really want to understand the interrelated challenges of utilization, diversity, and proximity. And then the purpose of this study is not to redraw school or cluster boundaries. And for those of you who haven't visited the boundary analysis website, the link is right there. Again, simple Google search will sort of get you there. And there are more input sort of worksheets that you'll be filling it in at the table, and there are more opportunities for you to interact and give more critical feedback of the work. Project outcomes. The study will result in a community engagement summary, include findings from the interactive tool. It will also result in a data analysis summary of current MCPS utilization, diversity, and proximity to school, and also have benchmarks with similar school districts. At the end of the day, it will serve as a critical data resource to inform future boundary studies based on metrics tied to policy FAA, which is Educational Facility Planning Policy. The study will not make recommendation on potential boundary revisions. Again, who we are. The project is led by WXY Studio. We are based in New York City and Washington, D.C. And as I explained earlier, we have done a range of projects related to schools in the past. We are joined here by Public Engagement Associates, who are our outreach and engagement specialists. And we are also joined by Transpar, who will be helping us with some transportation-related analysis. So our project approach really articulates what is already outlined in Policy FAA in many ways. And if you haven't done so, I would urge you to go, again, Google Policy FAA MCPS. It should be the first item in your search list. And I think the three lenses, and really the four lenses that we are talking about here, utilization, diversity, proximity, and assignment stability, are really well articulated in Policy FAA. And what does that mean? As you can imagine, under each of these lenses, there can be a series of analysis that can be done, and that is what our interim and final report will get to. Under utilization, we'll start to look at building capacity in feeder patterns, for example. Under diversity, we want to start looking at